My name is Anne Saller. I'm the owner of Book Carnival in Orange, California. And we're delighted tonight to be able to have an event celebrating the publication of Palm Springs Noir. And tonight we're going to have Ken Layne and Barbara DeMarco-Barrett, as well as Eric Bietner, who's been at the store many times. And that's all going to be taken care of by the wonderful Maddie Margarita, who does such a great job of that. Maddie, it's all yours.
Oh boy, it's all mine. I finally, this is my dream of control, Anne. So thank you very much.
I know.
For allowing us to do this and for inviting me. And I know everybody on the panel feels the same way. We're going to be talking about Palm Springs Noir, an amazing anthology of short stories about the unfathomable darkness that survives even in 354 days of sunshine. How's that for like a log line? I love that. I like it. The collection features short fiction by T. Jefferson Parker, Janet Fitch, Eric Bietner, Kelly Shire, Todd Goldberg, Michael Kraft, Barbara DeMarco-Barrett, Rob Roberge, J.D. Horn, Eduardo Santiago, Rob Bowman, Chris Benson, Ken Layne, and Alex Espinosa. Here with us tonight are editor and contributor Barbara DeMarco-Barrett, also author of The Water Holds You Still from Palm Springs Noir. Barbara spends time in the desert whenever she can. She hosts Writers on Writing on KUCI-FM, and her book Pen on Fire was an LA Times bestseller. Her short story Crazy for You was published in USA Noir, and she is also published in the LA Times, the LA Review of Books, Inlandia, Shotgun Honey, Partners in Crime, and Paradigm Shifts. Also with us tonight is Eric Bietner. Eric is a contributor. I guess your short story is the guest, right?
Yes.
Eric? Okay. Eric has been called the 21st century's answer to Jim Thompson. He has written more than 20 novels, including All the Way Down, Rum Runners, and The Devil Doesn't Want Me. When not spending the weekend vacationing in Palm Springs with his family, he co-hosts the podcast Writer Types and Noir at the Bar reading series. And last but not least, we're welcoming Ken Layne, author of The Loop Trail. Ken is the editor and publisher of Desert Oracle, a pocket-sized field guide to the mysterious Southwest desert, and hosts Desert Oracle Radio, host of Desert Oracle Radio, and its companion podcast from the Mojave High Desert. Once a month, he leaves his home alongside the Joshua Tree National Park to tell eerie campfire stories at the Ace Hotel and Swim Club in Palm Springs. Ken has recently published his first hardcover collection, Desert Oracle Volume 1. Okay, so welcome everybody. Now that everybody knows who everybody is, let's start by talking a little bit about the stories and your contributions, because it's a collection of fiction from a number of authors. So maybe if we talk to you about your contributions, we can get a feel for maybe the theme of the story. So I was hoping maybe you would read a page and then maybe talk about your story and the inspiration, what inspired you to write that particular story. So I don't know who wants to start.
I think
ladies first.
No, Eric.
Well, you know, you're both very effective at pointing the finger at each other very first. That must be a skill that you learn. So don't make me call on you. So
I think Eric.
All right. We take our orders from Barbara from the very beginning. Well, thank you for having me. My story is called The Guest, and I was inspired by the time that I spent in Palm Springs and the people that I know living in Los Angeles, where I am, who have income properties out there. And it's the kind of place that a lot of people go to retire, and a lot of people who are younger hope to one day retire. And so the smart ones get in there early and they buy property, and now they'll rent it out on Airbnb or something like that. And there's a certain paranoia that I have of I could never be a landlord because so much can go wrong. So I think that led me naturally into this story where the main character, Randall, has his income property, gets a panicked phone call from his caretaker out there, summoning him back to Palm Springs early to say something's gone wrong. So this is just a short section right when Randall—
You forgot to give him his feet.
Oh,
What?
this is a section right when Randall arrives at the house. What in the world is going on? Randall said. Follow me. Grayson led him through the house to the backyard. The palm trees were uplit and the pool cast a lazy movement of blue light over the yard and back of the house from the underwater lights. A shadow moved across the patterns of rippling water. Randall looked down into the pool. A body floated face down. When he turned back to Grayson, there was a smear of blood across his lip where he'd chewed his nails till they bled. Randall tried to keep his voice even and calm despite the sheer panic going on inside him. What happened? Grayson spoke in a voice that was half whine, half pleading for his life. He was staying here. He was fun and nice. Randall's pulse quickened until it made his chest ache. We were having fun, Grayson went on. He liked me. Grayson, what happened? We were drinking, and then we did some poppers. Poppers, Jesus, what is this, the 90s? I fell asleep. When I woke up, he was like this. Randall turned back to the pool and looked at the floating body. He was young, early 20s. His shirt floated open around him, like delicate wings catching a breeze. Beneath the fabric, Randall could see he was slim and broad-shouldered, like a swimmer, someone who should never have drowned. It was an accident. Randall said the words out loud, like maybe he was trying to make them come true. Yeah, it was an accident. He must have had a heart attack or passed out or maybe hit his head or something. Did you try to revive him? It had already been hours before I woke up. Randall crouched down, sitting back on his heels and staring at the water. What do we do? A single cricket chirped from the planter bed and the sound bore into Randall's ears like a needle. For all the romanticism around a chorus of crickets at night, a solo insect could drive a person to insanity. So that's how Randall finds the terrible trouble that awaits him in Palm Springs in my story.
Oh, bad decisions. I love bad decisions, Eric.
That's noir, right? It's
right.
taking a small problem and making it worse by your own doing.
That's true. So when you were thinking about the story, how did you decide to structure the story, or how did you decide how you were going to tell that story?
Well, being in one of these Akashic City Noir series has long been a goal of mine and a dream. So I was so excited when Barbara gave me the assignment. So I first was thinking, look, noir's in the title. It's right there on the cover. I'm going to go pure noir. So I was thinking of something that's very classic, could have been in Black Mask magazine in the 40s, that kind of style. So I think it's a dead body shows up, and rather than do the quick thing and call the police and then the story's over in a page and a half, of course, Randall decides that the best thing to do is to try to cover this. And it would just take one simple thing to cover this and no one would ever know. But then, as we all know, one simple thing spills over into another thing and then another and another. And it very quickly gets out of hand. And those are the kind of stories that I absolutely love to read. And it was a whole lot of fun to write one this time.
Well, and not to give anything away, but there's a lot of moral ambiguity in that story. In addition to the bad choices. So I think things that you don't see coming and surprises. So, okay, we're not going to talk more about that because I don't want to give it away.
Okay.
So let's move on to Ken. Ken, you want to read a little bit from
Sure.
Loop Trail? Okay.
I just got this last week and just cracked it open yesterday. It's good. Sorry, my bookmark fell out. I almost started reading Todd Goldberg's.
That wouldn't be so bad. It's a great story.
No, that's the thing. It'd be a Todd Goldberg story.
You'd have to pepper it with exclamation points and other words. If it was Todd's story. Yeah, but go ahead, Ken. We want to hear your story.
This is a story that takes place up here in my part of the desert, and it's called The Loop Trail. The Mojave Desert eats a couple of tourists every summer. It's the nature of the place. More people die around Joshua Tree from car crashes and pill overdoses and trying to run across Highway 62 in the dark than will ever die from a day hike. even in the oppressive heat of monsoon season. But it's the amateur hikers who make the headlines. A couple of years ago, Joshua Tree became a destination, not just as a weird desert wilderness a couple of hours from LA, but a weird desert wilderness that had become very popular on Instagram. You see it in music videos and fashion shoots. The twisted arms of our signature yucca trees turned into backdrops for various celebrities and social media influencers. If everybody is coming out here, it must be all right. A place with decent cell service and well-stocked grocery stores and stylish Airbnb cabins on every sandy road seems pretty safe to the modern visitor. And if you're used to the easy green paradise of Yosemite, you probably think national parks are all like that, woodsy campgrounds and friendly rangers in Smoky Bear hats. But the campgrounds in Joshua Tree National Park are just sand, hard parked sand, surrounded by boulders and cactus and scrub brush. There are rattlesnakes coiled on the trails and cholla lying in wait for bare ankles and suburban dog snouts. Most of the campsites close for summer because it's just too hot, but people come anyway and they feel lucky to be there at all. 3 seasons of the year you can walk around in relative comfort. Summer is not one of those seasons. Summer is hard in the desert, even the high desert, where it's often 15 degrees cooler than in Palm Springs, and that's still 100 plus in July and August. Besides, it's a haunted land. Desert wilderness is like that.
Oh boy.
Right.
You think about voice. Well, we heard voice there in on many levels. So what was it about this story that that called to you to make you interested enough to write it, Ken?
So since the visitorship at JT National Park and the Mojave in general has tripled in the last 5-6 years, we've had a couple more of these mystery vanishings of tourists and day hikers and such every summer. And it used to be more of a Death Valley thing because it's relatively milder here climate-wise. But with the number of people here, not only has it become a place where a lot of these simple mistakes that are so common in these stories, you could go this way or that way, and you go the way of the damned. And that's it. There's no going back and changing that decision at the Y and the trail. So there were a couple of these that got some national attention over the last few years, a couple that have become kind of local mythologies and legends, like, the sheriffs are in on it because so-and-so knew so-and-so's brother-in-law and he used to work at the jail, small town stuff. And then you also have the cover of the desert as a harsh place. And that's what this story is ultimately about. There's a dark motive that's hidden for a very long time, and it fools just about everybody.
Right. And it doesn't seem to surprise hardened desert residents, and nothing seems to surprise them. Our narrator seems to take these things pretty much in stride.
Yeah, this narrator is kind of a more responsible version of kind of what I do for work. Now I do a weird weekly radio show. This guy is a full-time 5 days a week local news reporter out of the radio station. And in a lot of these desert small towns, the local radio station, that's the only local news other than whatever madness is going around the Facebook groups or next door.
Yeah, you've seen my next door post. Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't think anybody was reading those.
Oh yeah. You could fill one of these books with next door entries.
All right, well, that'll be our next project. All right, so I think we got a sense of the loop trail. Barb, you want to read a couple of pages or a page from The Water Holds You Still?
Sure. And I apologize to those of you who have heard this because I see a couple of names of friends who have been at other events, so I'm sorry, but I'm going to read the beginning again. The water holds you still. The landline rang after midnight. It had to be my mother down in Palm Springs. She was the reason I kept the line. I picked it up. Hi, Mom. There was a noise, she said. I stood my brush in a jar of water. Red paint escaped the bristles, a blood cloud. I took the phone outside, the curly black cord stretched taut as a tightrope. Ferns along the patio were wet with night mist, common here on the Central Coast. Houses settle at night and make noises, I said. A few months ago, she began calling me about noises at night and the calls that were coming more often. A puff of breath and the faint strain of music, Sinatra, mood indigo. She'd become obsessed with him, more so since my stepfather, Jerry, died. A coyote was outside by the pool, she said. It was sniffing the water. Maybe it's bored, I said. No little dogs around to eat. Greta, that's not funny. You're keeping Joey Bishop in, right? He was her little red Pomeranian. He's in. Her voice dropped an octave. My sapphire ring is missing. Your brother was here. Every time he stops by, something else goes missing. Are you sure? Out on the highway, red and blue lights whirled by. Last week, it was my diamond earring, she said. I was going to give those to you. I took it personally. My brother knew they would be mine someday. I've always loved those earrings. Has anyone other than Ben been around? Repair people, pool cleaner, gardener, I can't keep track. So it could be anyone. Do you think your brother's gambling again, she asked. People go to those pawn shops up on Palm Canyon and over in Cathedral City to sell the things they steal, or they sell them on Club's List. You mean Craigslist. Make fun. Look, Mom, I said, if Ben's stealing from you, call the police, turn him in. I can't. He's my son. So that's the first page in a little bit.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Okay, so there are so many things wrong on so many different levels in that story,
Right.
just in those first pages. So what was it about this story that drew you to it? And I mean, it was twisty, turny kind of story. So where did this come from?
You know, I don't think it began that way. I think, I don't know about Eric and Ken and other writers who are here, but my stories tend to begin. I begin them somewhere because they have to begin. And then I work with what I have. And there's a lot of layering and I rewrite stories many times. And so what happened with this one was I was in Palm Springs just after I got the go-ahead to do this anthology. It was 2 years ago, June. And I'd rented a house out there to do writers' retreats. And I love the house. It was in Twin Palms, which is where my story takes place. And the neighborhood is full of mid-century modern houses, beautiful houses. And I was in one. And so it had this wonderful pool. And so I'm always a little suspicious of swimming pools because especially if they have electric lights, they have lights, of course, that are connected to electricity. And I always wonder, are they up to code? Who knows if this is going to hurt somebody? And then I started doing research because I wanted to do something a little different. Noir tends to have the tropes of sex, greed, and murder. And so I wanted to do something a little different. And the pool kept kind of pulling my attention. And I did some research and I found that many people who have swimming pools don't get them checked out and that they're not up to code. And so then I started looking into, well, what happens? What happens when they're not up to code? And some pretty horrific things happen. And so for me, the story was really a combination. The beginning was the setting and the swimming pool. And then because so much of my fiction has autobiographical elements, which I'm noticing more and more as much as I try to fictionalize, I called on a relationship with my brother and my mother that was troublesome. And I thought, well, what happened between us? I forgave my brother. But what if I didn't? What if I was a noir character who could not forgive? What would I do? What if I had a swimming pool? And that's sort of how it went.
That's a little scary. I'm glad you said that only part of it was autobiographical. Having read that story, I was a little nervous. Palm Springs is such a great setting. The desert itself, the entire desert is such a great setting for noir, for any story, but particularly for noir. So from your perspectives, what elements need to be in a story, a noir story set in Palm Desert?
Well, who's going to go? Eric, you going?
No, I defer to you, Ken. I went first last
Yeah.
time.
So there's the Chandler book he never finished about the desert, you know. What is it called? Poodle Springs?
Poodle Springs, yeah.
Yeah.
And so that kind of looms over, because like if Chandler couldn't pull it off, what the hell are we gonna do with it? But I think that was more the state of Chandler as a writer, and with his ego kind of collapsing at that point. And if your ego collapses, you can't write like Chandler. So when Barbara asked me to do it, and thank you, Barbara, for asking me to do this. I've got a pile of this series. You know, I've loved this series for a long time. But the big thing you got to get in a desert story like this is that everything is in one way or another a reaction to the oppressive heat and the sun. And the sun will bleach the bones of roadkill in a couple of weeks out here, while the thing will still have skin on it in more humid climates. So the desert makes really quick work. And because so many people live in the desert now, all the big fast growing cities in the Southwest are in the desert. They're Vegas, or Phoenix, St. George, Salt Lake, Tucson, places like this. And because in our mind, we think, well, if I don't want to kill somebody, but if I kill somebody, I know to dump the body in the desert.
Yeah.
So
that's why people move there. Okay.
Yeah. We moved there for proximity to services such as, gym, In-N-Out burgers, and the desert to dump the bodies in.
I see.
But it's the whole thing that's been mentioned in almost all the reviews and the notices that the book has gotten so far, which have been terrific, is the sunshine and the darkness. And that's really the key thing in Los Angeles of that whole 30s, 40s version of that as well. So with the desert, it's even more extreme. And I just read the opening pages of all the stories yesterday, and everyone is like, yeah, you got that. Yeah, that's in there. So, we got the stuff in there, and it's in there, but it's in there in a new time. These tropes that might be from the 30s or 40s, they're very different and much more interesting when they're in our era with cell phones and internet and Airbnbs.
Yeah. And I really like, the notion of Palm Springs too, it's always been fascinating to me because it is one of those cities, like you say, you take a place like Vegas or Palm Springs, they're and essentially a mirage. It's all an illusion. It's, the water's piped in, everything that's green is fake. So there's this artifice to the place where you live that is very interesting to me. And I think, for a noir type character, it's a perfect setting for that, because these are people who are probably lying to you. These are people who are trying to hide something. And like Ken said, in my story, it was great. It was like, oh, hey, I got a body, I need to get rid of it. Well, geez, that's just 15 minutes up the hill,
Just follow that sign, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's also a lot of opportunists in Palm Springs, I think. I think in any resort town, you're dealing with people who are coming in to see what they can get, and you're dealing with people who are there to relax, which means there's crime. There's unlocked doors of cars, of hotel rooms. Property crime is extremely high in Palm Springs compared to the rest of the US. And I think because of that, it's deceiving how beautiful it is, and yet what goes on there,
Yeah. Barbara, when you started telling me about the research you were doing and the statistics you were checking on Palm Springs, I was shocked how much crime goes on out there.
Yeah,
Well, there it goes. You guys just screwed yourselves all over. The Chamber of Commerce will not be selling.
Yeah, sorry.
You keep talking like that. So you need to like
No, they like the
on the crime
glamour.
statistics. Yeah.
They love the glamour.
They
They
love
got
the
their
glamour.
film festival and
right.
Yeah.
they trade on that.
all
it's
those
like
wonderful things.
you can go see houses where dead people lived, Elvis and Priscilla's honeymoon house.
I know we need a Palm Springs Noir tour,
Yeah.
Oh, I would sign up for that in a heartbeat.
In the
Let's
winter.
do it in winter.
Yes.
No, Ken, we know what happens when people go out in the desert in your area. So we're definitely doing it in the winter. So, you talked a little bit about like the heat and the history that's there and the glamour. But, I think that there's also a certain amount of mysticism in the desert and a brutality to the desert and isolation that, I sense that when I read everybody's story, and there was an isolation and an aspect of isolation that came through all of these stories. And I don't know if that's a function of the personality of the character, or whether it's the fact that when you're in the desert, you don't feel necessarily as connected. There's so much space and it's bleak, and so I don't know. What do you guys think? I mean, was that just a coincidence, or do you think that's...
No, I don't think it's coincidence. It's the desert draws people who need solitude. Artists, weirdos, mystics, Moses, Jesus, Muhammad, they all went up in the desert wilderness to talk to God. And now people do it here. They get some mushrooms from their friend at work, and they rent an Airbnb, and they at least try to talk to God.
But I also think it's that sense of feeling like you are isolated and then realizing you're not sometimes. Like during quarantine, my family and I looked for places that we could still get away for the weekend, but remain isolated. And we went out to Joshua Tree for a weekend. And after living in a city for so long, we were out there, and you're in this house that feels like you're a million miles to nowhere. And yet every sound you hear is definitely a guy with a machete. So it's you're isolated, and yet the minute you discover you're not, trouble is going to happen.
I think also with noir, noir is very much really speaks to the dark side of human nature. And I think if you go into that place, I think you are isolated. Noir characters tend to be isolated within themselves, right?
Yeah.
Because they're dealing with issues that nobody wants to talk about. And I think other genres of crime fiction are more cheery. I mean, cozies are definitely more cheery than noir. And, even just your mystery where there's a crime to solve, it ends victorious, right?
Yeah.
If the bad guy's caught and everything goes on, whereas in noir stories end just, but not happy. I mean, there's usually a justice of some sort, but it's not a happy justice.
Yeah. Well, and it's always the tension that's interesting to me in noir that takes place in the city, is you usually have characters who, even though they're surrounded by millions of people in cases, they do feel isolated in their own way, or they're looking to escape. They're looking to get away from someone who's after them and all those things. So they're seeking isolation in a crowd. And that's one of the things I think that makes city noir very interesting. So I think the isolated in this desert noir, it kind of inverts that, where you have somebody who's seeking solitude or isolation in a place where they think it's abundant, and yet for a lot of the characters in these stories, everywhere they turn, where they're trying to escape something, they're running into their past, they're running into the law, something is going to trip them up where they thought they had an open road ahead of them.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny, Barb, you mentioned that you thought the stories had an element of justice at the end. So I'm curious, do you feel like your story had an element of justice at the end?
Sure.
And what do you guys think? But let's talk with Barbara first, because
Okay.
I think there was, but maybe not what people might think.
Right. Well, I mean, she, the original ending, I think, was that she was, well, I can't tell you what the original ending was because many of you have not read the story, but
See, you guys notice how I almost got her to tell us what was going on, but go ahead.
but what, I took it a step further, okay, because it was going to end in a more typical way. And then I thought, wait a minute, what would be the just thing to happen? Well, that's what has to happen. And so it's open-ended. I think the ending, I like open-ended stories. That I like that it could go on, or maybe it's vague what ends up happening. But yeah, I thought it was perfectly just.
Okay, now I'm worried about you again. Okay, so all right, Eric, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think the ending in noir is often it's a cosmic justice in a way. And my classic example is if anyone's read the novel of Double Indemnity versus seeing the film, they changed the ending. And in the film, I think on the surface, it seems much more tragic. And the film came out in 1944. Apologies for any spoilers, but you had a long time to see it. I mean, the both main characters die at each other's hand. And so you think, oh no, everybody's dead. And isn't that a bummer? But if you read the book, they don't die. And yet in a way, it's so much more tragic because they're heading off into this. They've worked so hard and they've killed her husband and they've schemed and they've plotted and they've gotten away with it. But in that final moment, they realize they hate each other. They can never trust each other. And yet they're literally on a boat sailing off into the sunset. And that is so much more noir to me.
Right.
Like, oh, you have just built your own prison cell that now you have to live in. And I think that's the kind of justice that Barbara's talking about. It's like,
Right.
is it justice in the law? No. Is it justice in the Hays Code where the bad guy needs to either go to jail or die on screen because we need to present that? No, it's not that. But is it cosmic justice? Oh yeah. These two people deserve what they get, and what they get is each other.
Yeah, I mean, there is a moral justice in noir.
Yeah.
Every story, I think, is morally just by the end,
So everybody's got, the heroes have their own code.
My favorite thing about noir is the absence of that. That's what makes it real, and that's what opens up the reader to this dark night of the soul. In real life, there's rarely any justice. In real life, everybody can know what happened with something, and there's almost never any justice, especially if the person is rich, powerful, or just white. That's often enough to get by. Although we have such poverty and such broken social systems and families and nothing really for people to hold on to, that it's very easy for anybody to slip through the cracks now. And my favorite kind of thing in this genre, besides say Hammett and Highsmith, where there's never any justice. There's no justice. Sometimes the narrator with morals or a character with morals realizes what's going on, but no one pays for what's been done. Certainly in my story, there's no justice, which is how it so often happens with people who disappear, whatever method led to their disappearance. And in Mulholland Drive, which is, I think, the best modern noir in any medium, one of the recurring themes there is people dying alone in LA. Like that just happens again and again in the multiple worlds. And you die, and what's the biggest horror? You die alone and no one ever finds you. Or when they finally open your apartment, you've been there for 6 months or a year or something.
And your cat has eaten your face off. But,
yeah. Good pets.
Yeah, thank you. So I think, first of all, I want to thank you for reminding me that I could never look at Fred McMurray the same way on My Three Sons after Double Indemnity.
Yeah, no, it's,
So thanks a lot, Eric, for bringing that.
I'm fascinated.
trauma up.
I love the fact that the vast majority of people, like at least in my generation, started with My Three Sons, and then you go back and you see him
Yeah.
in Double Indemnity or Pushover, and you're like, what?
Yeah.
That? Oh my God!
Flash.
Same thing.
Yeah.
Not a lot of people know this also, but Hugh Beaumont, dad from Leave It to Beaver, he started in a long string of crime films where he played both the detective. He was a Michael Shane and when it got picked up by PRC, but he's got a bunch of like Poverty Row noirs in the 40s where he was just a real cad and doing some terrible things.
Yeah, he was a heavy.
Mhm.
Yeah, and he famously played basically the Fred McMurray role in a film called Apology for Murder. I'm going to get real film noir geek here, but if no one knows Apology for Murder, it was a film that was so blatantly a ripoff of Double Indemnity that Paramount sued PRC and got it removed from theaters.
Oh, no.
Huh.
It's
See,
the
see what you
exact
learned?
same plot. It's awful. It's a fascinating curio if you like film noir, but you compare it to Double Indemnity and you put basically the same script and you see, oh, Billy Wilder was an artist and these guys had like 4 days to shoot this thing.
And lucky and talented too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, we talked about your three stories in particular, but there are other stories, and we mentioned, Ty Goldberg and guys like T. Jefferson Parker and, those kind of guys.
A few
So,
unknowns, right?
Yeah.
right. Yeah. Some startup kind of people. So, Barbara, I'm just curious, as the editor, when you were looking to put together the anthology, not only did you have a theme, you probably had some goals or I guess goals that you were hoping that you could achieve for the reader, that when a reader picked up the book, they would have a certain type of experience, a full experience. So how did you go about delivering that? Because you certainly did. The stories are all different and they have different perspectives and different characters. And I mean, they're a great, entertaining compilation of stories. So how did you make that happen?
I think all of the writers come from different areas in writing fiction. I mean, I didn't pull from only writers who write noir, only writers who write, potboilers, only writers who write literary fiction, but a range of writers. And so it was really choosing writers for their specialty versus specific works, and I trusted that they'd pull it off. I mean, there was just a lot of trust. There was one writer that didn't make it. She tried and tried and could not pull it off. And so it couldn't take the story, which was extremely difficult. But it was really, I just had a lot of trust in the people I chose. And so then it was a matter of, looking at the map of the Coachella Valley and wanting the stories to take place around it, not in one concentrated area, so that there'd be a flavor of the whole area from Joshua Tree down to Salton Sea to Anza / Idlewild over to Wonder Valley, and just that whole area. There's a lot of trust, and I'm so happy everyone pulled it off, because it could not have worked, but I knew it would work because all the writers were so good coming into it. And I've read most of the stories at least 2 or 3 times, and I continue to discover new things. And then, it's on Scrib too. And so listening to it is a different experience, listening to the stories. I don't know that answers your question, Maddie, but I know that there was just a ton of trust going into it, that I liked the writers and I couldn't wait to see what they would come up with.
So you didn't say, okay, I'm going to depend on, let's say, Todd for humor or darkness, or you just,
No.
did people just send you their stories and cross their fingers, or how did that work? What
Yeah,
was the
yeah. I mean,
process like?
there were constraints of word count, 3,000 to 6,000 words, and setting. Those are really the only constraints. And then stories started coming in. And I had questions, I think, about all of them, or for the writers of all of them, some more than others. But yeah, it was, I think they were surprising. Like Eric's, I didn't know Eric was so funny, so darkly funny. His story is just so darkly funny. And
Again, we're worried about you, but go on.
I didn't know he was going to do that. I mean, there was no kind of assignment like, okay, well, you're, this kind of writer, so this is what we're going to expect from you. I figured everyone would deliver wonderful pieces, and then we'd figure out where they go, how they go, what order they go in. And then, of course, Frank Sinatra's songs played a big part in terms of subheads for the sections, figuring out, what goes in this one, what goes. So some were so surprising. It was, it sort of expanded what I thought about noir too, because there was one story that came in that had no sex, greed, or murder. And I thought,
Well, like, what?
is this noir? Is this even noir? And I talked to the publisher. He's like, it has the vibe. And I went, okay, there's a vibe. That's great, because now, we can go beyond the tropes as long as there's the vibe, right?
Yeah.
I mean, not everybody would agree with that would be noir, but I like that. I like that it's, a feeling that the words, that the sentences, that the paragraphs, that the story puts forth.
For the record, I had no idea my story had any humor in it until Barbara pointed it out. Totally unintentional. And like you, Maddie, I was a little worried. I was like, oh, you think that's funny? Oh,
I know. It's amazing what you learn here at Book Carnival.
yeah.
So what happens at Book Carnival stays at Book Carnival.
We'll think about that.
Yeah.
You really didn't think it was funny, Eric? You didn't think your story was funny?
I've been told over the years that, I've had that said about a lot of my novels and my short stories, but it's definitely something that I never intend to write something that is jokey, but I do think that there's a balance in terms of, putting characters in a situation where things go so badly and they make such terrible decisions that it does come off humorous. But I also think part of that is for the reader, when you reach a certain pitch of tension, you're on the lookout for something to break that a little bit. And oftentimes it's taking a chuckle in something that is pretty dark. So, and I always go back to film. I'm sorry, I'm a film school grad, so this isn't always my thing, but you go into Psycho and you go through the whole shower scene, and then Norman comes down and he finds it, and there's the whole cleanup, and it goes for a long time with no dialogue, and it's very tense, and people have just seen this shocking thing, and now you have this long tail to it. And then he takes the car and he tries to sink it in the swamp, and the car goes and it gets stuck halfway. And even in 1960, every time that happened, the audience erupted in laughter, and you realize they needed it. They needed to release at that moment, and something that is not funny on the surface, it was enough for them to go, oh, okay, I just need a little bit of an adrenaline dump there.
Yeah.
And I think what was interesting too is, we see characters making bad decisions in Eric and Barbara's stories, and then in Ken's, we have a distance there that is actually even creepier. Thank you, Ken. From the observer's point of view, with the lack of emotion almost, in that makes what's happening even less humane.
Yeah. And yet that character is the only one who has any interest in the truth of the story, and seems to have an almost cold dismissal of the situation. But then you realize everybody around, especially the cops. I think this is a crucial thing in noir. The cops, no classic noir writer would be surprised by Black Lives Matter. The cops are always the crooks.
Yeah.
It's often the lone wolf he or she out there trying to figure something out that society just doesn't give a damn about.
Yeah.
Right. Right. Well, and whether it's the cops or authority figures of any kind, government, the corruption and, the system and all those things.
Yeah.
The media, of course.
Right. I mean, there are insurmountable obstacles, but again, what I love about these stories, particularly Eric and Barbara's stories, is that you have that element of, oh my God, don't do that. No, no, I can't believe, please don't do that. That's not good. Please can't you see what's going to happen? And it's like don't go upstairs.
Right.
When you're babysitting, don't answer the phone. Sort of element to it that it gives it a suspense, because you have a feeling you're begging them in your mind not to do what they're going to do anyway. So it was really fun to read them.
And hopefully, in the best noir stories, the ones that I like the most, you're also in the back of your mind kind of rooting for them to get away with it a little bit, right?
Oh,
yeah. Well, and I think that's the justice too, because justice takes all kinds of forms. And I think Catherine had a question. She said she's confused. Is cosmic justice a requirement of the genre or not? Seems like there's a difference of opinion. Love it.
Well, I think Eric and Ken are saying the same thing. They're saying, because cosmic justice is not justice of society or law. It's what the character deserves. Is how I see it.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Cosmic justice.
Okay.
And noir is one of those genres, both on the page and on the screen, that people love to try to put it into a really small box. And I think a collection of stories like this, and I think the entire Akashic Noir series has done a really great job, like Barbara said, of getting writers who don't typically write this to write noir story, and just to get a sense of, as she said, that vibe. And so you really do get a wide range of what noir is and what it makes you feel, rather than following a strict set of rules. So.
And just real quickly too, I think sometimes readers have a feeling that writing a short story is easier because there's less words, and that might not always be true. So I'm going to turn that over to you guys to see what your opinions are.
I think short stories are a lot easier than novels. I know, I've heard that said, it's harder writing a short story. I so don't agree with that. I don't know. I think novels are just, terrifically hard because there's so many pages. Such a big world, right? A story, I think a story, I don't know. It does take a lot of crafting and revising, but is it, I don't know, Eric, is it harder to, and Ken, you've both published novels, are stories harder or easier?
Ken, what do you think?
Well, for noir, there's something kind of specific, because to me, the best classic noir, they're short books, they're terse. So you start writing I was certainly doing this when I wrote this story. And once I finally worked out how the character was going to deal with the mystery, and how the environment was going to deal with the character, and vice versa, and everything, I thought, well, I'm going to be done with this in a week or two. I could get a book out of this, so because it depends how many things you build up for it. I think all of us have done short pieces for periodicals, for newspapers, for whatever. And so, yeah, it's easier to write a piece than to write a novel. A novel's going to wreck like a year and a half of your life if you get off easy. A magazine piece, there's a deadline, you're done with it, and you move on with your life. The short stories are like in this kind of liminal, space between them. It could be either thing. So certainly when I see people who write tons of short stories and are always submitting stuff and everything, I think, how do you get the energy? Like, you got to make worlds each time.
Right, each time.
Yeah.
Well, and I think not only that, you have to be able to have such a clear image of the heart of your story, of the emotional hook and through line that if you don't have a clear vision of what that is, trying to write a story of 3,000 words is murder.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think there's a clarity of thought that you need in a short story that maybe you have a little more room in a novel.
Yeah, that's what I hear.
So they say. I don't know. I read a lot. So when you guys wrote the stories that you wrote, what were you hoping that people would feel when they finished your story?
You said it exactly, Maddie. I want people to twist and think, oh, don't do that. But and then also at the same time think, well, yeah, maybe it will work. I'm not sure. I mean, and then to get that, well, and to me, the thing that hooks me into a great noir story is thinking, what would I do? We talked about this last time that Barbara and I talked, but like, my favorite little subgenre niche of noir is finding a bag of money and doing what you can to try to keep it. And it's been done dozens of times, and I love every single time they do it. And you just can't help but think, gosh, what would I do? And you can't help try to keep notes. So, okay, well, definitely don't do that, because that didn't work out well for this character. And, but I think being able to put yourself into a story like that and to think, what would happen if I suddenly woke up to the worst day of my life? How would I deal with it? That's going to sink me into a story, a short or a novel, and take me along for the ride. That's what I look for in a book or a story.
How about you, Ken? Or do you think about the reader? Do you just tell your story?
I think about the reader. Most stuff I write, I end up doing for listeners or on stage or something. So I think about it because I'm going to be reading it and trying to sell it in that way. And for this, I wanted the environment of the high desert to be the main character. So the narrator, the less said, the better. The narrator is you know their approach, what their knowledge is of the situation and everything, but they are revealing the landscape and the environment for you in a way that the characters who meet bad fates are learning about the environment. So the best way to take this stuff seriously is to get lost, to have your car break down, to almost die, that kind of thing. And those people will always respect the environment in a way that a bachelorette party and a $400 a night Airbnb with a hot tub are probably not even going to care. So I'm glad we have an economy up here beyond the Marine base now, but there's also a lot of people who come up here and are just extremely careless, and whether it's fires or careless with themselves, walking their dogs into the national park when it's 110 degrees and there's cactus and rattlesnakes everywhere. So that my goal is to make the environment alive and in people's minds as a real part of this place, and it's not just modernist vacation rentals.
Well, as a writer, it was really annoying to read all your stories because every single one of them, the setting worked in service to the plot, and there was no gratuitous setting, which I think would be a temptation when you're in a compilation or an anthology about Palm Desert to wax on about how hot it was and the laciness of Palo Verde trees and things like that. But the stories are just so well done that you don't really find anything like that. There's really an economy of words and efficiency there that when you read these stories, they're great. You can read them either one at a time. If you only have a few minutes, take the book with you everywhere you go. So if you have a few minutes to read one story, then you can sit down and read one story. If you have the luxury of reading more than that, you can sit down and maybe read 2 or 3 at a time. So it's like that box, the Forrest Gump box of chocolate things. You can sit down and have one, or you can, poke a hole in the bottom of it and see if you like one, and then put it back, and all those other things. So, I mean, I think the story has so many options in there, which was great. So I'm sorry, Barb, I tripped over your answer to how you wanted people to feel when they read your story.
I don't really think of the reader in the early drafts. It maybe later when it's close to being done, but I don't know, for me, that stops me if I'm thinking of the reader too much. Unlike Ken, I'm not performing it. It's, it's not going to become live until, of course, it's published, hopefully, and then who knows. But I think what I keep coming back to is after someone reads my story, they're probably never going to look at swimming pools the same. I mean,
True. Very true.
Not. I mean, now, it's like, ugh. But yeah, I think that, yeah, but I don't know. It is interesting how different writers deal with the reader, whether we're thinking of the reader as we're writing and what we hope is the takeaway or not. But I just don't tend to think that way as I'm writing.
Okay. All right. Does anybody else have questions? Anne, do you? I was looking, I don't know whether we've just mesmerized and amazed people into not having questions, but
can I say one thing, Maddie? It just occurred to me today, pairing Eric and Ken, like I didn't do this on purpose, but they each have a podcast. So Eric has Writer Types, which is about crime fiction, and Ken has Desert Oracle. And those are my 2 favorite podcasts. Like,
thank you.
I will never miss either of their episodes. Other podcasts, like, maybe, but yeah. And so today I'm going, that is so interesting that the 2 of them are here together tonight.
And you've got the radio show in Irvine.
Right.
Yeah.
That's true.
We're the radio branch of the book.
All these multi-talented people.
exactly.
I'm still working on my beard though.
Did you get one in quarantine?
Yeah, you're looking at it. It's been 14 months.
Eric, your Writer Types thing, is that the thing that does events in Los Angeles?
I do a reading series called Noir at the Bar, which is separate, but I host both.
But you're okay. All right. I have some friends in LA who have done the bar thing.
Yeah.
With you, and I'm going to subscribe to your podcast.
Please do.
I've never heard it.
Well,
great.
It's very good.
Fun.
Okay, so we have a question from Jennifer. How did the authors decide on the title of their piece?
Oh, titles.
Great question, because there are some great titles.
Titles are so hard.
I love titles. I'm right. It's hard. It's easy. I decided on mine because of what happens in the swimming pool.
And yours is so evocative, and I feel like mine is so dull in comparison.
But my title was there's a real place that's called that, and I like those terse noir titles.
Mm-hmm.
Big Sleep, Red Harvest.
Right.
I mean, they can be good long too. The Talented Mr. Ripley, etc. But I really like those terse 2 or 3 word ones. And this was a real place, and it also gave a sense of the circular aspect of these disappearances and the people's lives and the media attention, and eventually it's a loop.
Yeah.
Only the characters change.
Mm-hmm.
It was interesting when I was naming, mine's called The Guest, and I think there's a choice to be made there because I named it after the dead guy who only ever appears in the story as a corpse, but I felt like it seemed appropriate because I'm basically naming the story after the inciting incident, and the characters who have to react to that and swirl around that. It's the kind of story, I tried to lead with the title as, without this person, without this character of the guest, none of this story would have happened. So using a character who doesn't necessarily appear on the page other than as a corpse, but is the reason for the whole affair to have happened in the first place.
Okay. Anybody else? Anne, do you have any questions?
No, you've covered so much of it, and I assume that many of these squares that I'm looking at without faces are people who have contributed. Do you recognize them, Maddie or Barbara?
I don't see any
I
squares.
recognize some of
Oh,
them,
here's the gallery.
but not contributors to the book.
Okay,
I think
I
we
just
have-
wondered if we could recognize them as well if they tuned in. You
And
wore
then-
them out getting it perfect, right?
and Barbara, Catherine says we're fans. Did you help with the titles, Barb, or did everybody come to you with a titled piece? And
I think everybody came with their own titles. They were just perfect,
okay,
It was
Yeah,
so-
and then you did the Sinatra
yes,
sectioning off of everything, the four
Right.
parts.
right.
okay.
Yes.
I think more authors would like to hear that their titles are perfect, so that must make you feel good.
Yeah, I enjoyed that. And here's what I'm going to do when I actually read a bunch of stories when my weekend starts tomorrow afternoon, is we have a radio station in Palm Springs called Mod FM. And Mod FM is like all Sinatra and Tony Bennett and Dinah Washington and Keely Smith and everything. It's all that kind of, it's the perfect soundtrack. Whenever I'm down there staying overnight or for a weekend or something, put on Mod FM, but it streams. So it's every time I listen to it, it's just, you expect someone to knock on the door and say, "A body's been found, sir."
And it's Mod FM.
Yeah. Yeah. If you
Telling
have
that-
a radio app like TuneIn or whatever you use to listen to radio on your phone or whatever, you can do that. But in the low desert, of course, it's, I'll tell you what it is.
And Ken, while you're looking that up, maybe you could put your address in the chat room so that everybody who wants to come up and spend time now, because you've made Joshua Tree sound so attractive.
Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I'm
Just,
sure everybody would like to come up and stay for a
just
while.
drive up the road and turn left, I think.
Bring your own
one-
mushrooms, right?
Well,
Yeah.
Yes. And if you are coming here, bring some food from the low desert because we don't have any restaurants. 107.3 Mod FM.
Yeah. And bring a shovel, apparently, right, Ken?
Yeah. And bring your working boots because this ain't soft ground.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a new radio station to listen to, a couple of podcasts to follow, and some good reading.
Excellent.
Sounds
That's
about it.
that's
Yeah.
a good gift bag.
Yes, it does. It would.
And we have Book Carnival, and Book Carnival has the books.
I do.
Can we
Sitting
say the
waiting for
address to
everybody.
the store?
I can. 348 South Tustin Street in Orange.
And your website, Anne?
Oh, annesbookcarnival.com.
Great.
And I think everybody should go out and buy this book. I don't say this all the time. Maybe a lot, but not all the time. I think you should go out and buy the book and I don't think that you'll be sorry. I think that if you don't find at least, how many stories are there, Barb?
14.
14? If you don't find at least 10 that you look at and say, you know what, I would have missed reading this story, I would be surprised. And I'll give you my telephone number. You can call me afterwards. And if it tells you the time, just keep talking anyway.
It's one of the better ones that I've seen, and the talent shows.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah,
It's
it
really
is.
great.
It is.
Everybody should be very proud of being part of this.
Oh,
Absolutely.
thank you, Ann.
Yeah.
Yeah. Barb, you did a great job.
Thank you.
Okay.
It's true.
Any last words from anyone? All right. You had your chances.
If you're going to do some kind of crime, try to have a moral angle to it. It'll make
Yeah.
for a better story for whatever newspaper reporter writes about it.
It's amazing the stuff you learn here. And I never walk away from a book carnival event without something that I take with me that I believe is a life lesson. So yeah, put a shovel in my trunk and have a good moral angle whenever you commit a crime. I've got it. All right, I got it. I
What
won't
more
forget
did you
that.
ask for?
That's right. I won't forget those things.
I want to thank
And a
all
towel.
of you, particularly the panel, for probably one of the more interesting ones that I've heard in a long time. All of you had so much to contribute. The book is wonderful and it is available. So come visit. And all of you need to come visit too.
Yes, we do.
I haven't seen Eric in forever. Ken, I've never seen you, so it's been great to get acquainted with you.
I was
Same.
down there not too long ago, Anne, and I put you to work wrapping some of my books.
How long ago now was that? Just
That
think
was
about it. This
that was
past
only-
year is a blank.
That was only 2 months ago, 3 months ago.
Okay.
Maybe it just seems like that, Eric.
Yeah, well.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
And-
have we lost a gap in there.
And
Yeah.
Anne's got Anne's still has a bunch of my novels on her shelf. So go down there and clear out. She needs the space. So
That
don't
is
buy them
so
for me. Do it for
true.
Anne.
Those are the truest words I've heard yet. Yes, I need the space, and I do have several of your books. All right.
And this is the
Everybody,
thing
for
with
that matter.
independent bookstores, you know, the only way they stay alive is if we buy books there. And
That's-
so we want Book Carnival to stay around for a long,
Yes.
long time. So, yeah.
Right,
Thank
and they're
you.
not fattening. So very low calorie. So I highly encourage everyone to buy books. So
Good
and
last
shoes.
statement. All
and
right.
shoes. Okay. All right, everybody. Good night.
Thank you.
Thanks. Good
Bye-bye.
night.
Thank you, Anne.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ken.
There will be a recording if anybody wants one.
Oh,
Great.
good. We'll put it on the Desert Oracle website too.
Okay. Send
Okay.
me your information, Ken.
I will.
Okay. Bye now.
Bye.